When Donald Farfrey left Henchard, the corn merchant's business was once again in need of a new manager. Henchard decided to send for Job, the man who would have been manager if Farfrey had not come to Casterbridge. Henchard had frequently seen the man about the streets and knew that he was at present unemployed. A note was sent to his house. Job came after dark and made his way to the office where Henchard sat waiting for him. I am again in need of a manager, said the corn merchant. When can you start? Straight away, sir, said Job. Job knew all about Henchard and how his business worked. He also knew about Henchard's business dealings in Jersey and about Lucetta. I know Jersey too, sir, he said. I was living there when you used to do business that way. Oh, yes, I've often seen you there. Indeed, very good. Then the thing is settled. You will work for me now, said Henchard, staring hard at Job to make sure he understood. One thing is necessary to me. As the biggest corn and hay dealer in these parts, the Scotsman who has grown so big must be cut out. Do you hear? We two can't live side by side. That's clear and certain. I have seen it all, said Job. Fairly, I mean, of course, Henchard continued, but as hard and tough as is fair, rather more so. This year we will buy up all the farmers' corn and hay and leave nothing for him. We'll starve him out. I've got the money, and I can do it. I think you can too, said the new man. Job disliked Farfrey as much as Henchard did, for he felt the Scotsman had taken this job from him unfairly in the first place. The season's weather seemed to favor their scheme. It was bad. Henchard decided that there would be a poor harvest, and Job agreed with him. Quietly, without telling Job, Henchard visited an old fortune teller who also said that the weather would be bad at harvest time that year. The next Saturday, Henchard bought so much grain that there was quite a lot of talk in the town. The weather throughout July was terrible, and Henchard brought grain until his granaries were completely full. Then the weather changed. This was a terrible blow to the corn merchant. He had bought so much that he now found himself short of money. He had to start selling what he had only just bought, and for a lot less than he had paid. In the blazing sun of an early August day, Henchard met Farfrey in the marketplace. Farfrey knew of his dealings, though he did not guess how they were intended to affect him, and offered Henchard a few words of sympathy. Henchard seemed angry at first, but then he said it was not serious and not half so bad as people thought. But Henchard had to enter the Casterbridge Bank the next day for reasons which had never before sent him there, and it was soon rumored that much of Henchard's property was in the possession of his bankers. Coming down the steps of the bank, Henchard saw Job. Job had just met someone and was saying, a fine hot day. when Henchard came up. You can say that, can you? A fine hot day, cried Henchard in a savage whisper. If it hadn't been for your stupid advice, it might well have been a fine day. Why did you let me go on when a word of doubt from you would have made me think twice? My advice, sir, was to do when you thought best. A useful fellow, and the sooner you help somebody else in that way, the better. Henchard continued to shout at Jock until he was so angry he dismissed him there and then. You shall be sorry for this, sir. Sorry as a man can be, said Job. He looked after the corn merchant, who had turned away angrily and was pushing through the nearby crowds. While Henchard was trying to sort out his affairs and was selling his corn at a terrible loss to cover his debts, Farface was quietly buying. The harvest started. There were 3 days of very good weather. But then, what if that fortune teller was right after all? Said Henchard to himself. The fact was, as soon as the harvest work began, the wind started to blow strongly, the clouds gathered, and the rain poured down. From that day on, it was clear there would not to be a successful harvest after all. If Henchard had only waited long enough, he might at least have avoided loss, even if he did not make a profit. But he had not had the patience. It was not his character to wait. Meanwhile, Donald Farfrae was very successful in his business and grew rich. He'll soon be mayor, said Henchard to himself bitterly. One day, Henchard decided he would go and see Lucetta, even though she had not seemed to want to speak to him. When he knocked at her door, he was told that she could not see him because she had an engagement to go out. Henchard went back to his wagon and stood there thinking, and as he did so, he saw Farfrae walk up to Lucetta's house. He was clearly expected, for Lucetta quickly came out and away they went together. Henchard had not been observed. He was quite certain that they were going to watch the harvesting and he decided to follow them. Nearly the whole of Casterbridge was helping with the harvest, and when there was no rain, everyone worked at night by the light of the moon. Henchard watched Donald and Lucetta walking among the workers. Suddenly they turned around and came back towards him. It looked as if they would meet and that would be awkward, so he stepped back into the hedge at the edge of the field. You have my permission, Lucetta was saying gaily to Farfrae. Speak whatever you like. Well then, replied Farfrae with the unmistakable voice of a man in love, you are sure to be much sought after for your position, wealth, and beauty. You have many admirers. Will you be content from now on to have just one? Is he the one who is speaking to me now? She said, laughing. Very well, sir. What next? Ah, I'm afraid that what I feel will make me forget my manners. Then I hope you'll never have any if you lack them only for that cause. After some broken words which Henchard missed, she added, are you sure you won't be jealous? Farfrae seemed to assure her that he would not by taking her hand. You are certain, Donald, that I love nobody else, she then said. but I should wish to have my own way in some things. In everything, what special thing did you mean? If I wished not to live always in Casterbridge, for instance, if I found I was not happy here. Henchard did not hear the reply. He did not care to listen any longer as they continued on their way. He let them pass out of his hearing. He saw them part, Farfrae going up to one of the farmers on a business matter, and Lucetta turning to go home alone. Henchard left the field and followed her. His state of mind was such that on reaching Lucetta's door, he did not think to knock, but opened it and walked straight up to her sitting room. She did not see him at first. The light was so low, and she was standing by the window, looking out. As soon as she realized he was there, she gave a little cry, almost of terror. How can you frighten me so? She exclaimed. It is past 10 o'clock, and you have no right to surprise me here at such a time. I'm not sure about that. I do have an excuse, he said, and standing close to her, began to talk of the Jersey days. He asked Lucetta why, after all, she had come to Casterbridge to find him. I thought I ought to marry you for the sake of my conscience since you were free. And why don't you think so now? She was silent. It was clear that conscience had been put to one side now. New love had arrived. The only thing she could say was, I was a poor girl then. Now my situation has altered, so I am hardly the same person. That's true, and it makes the case awkward for me. But I don't want to touch your money. I am quite willing that every penny of your property shall remain for your personal use. You cannot honorably refuse me, he added, and unless you give me your promise this very night to be my wife before a witness, I'll tell people about our affair in fairness to other men. Lucetta looked beaten. If her heart been given to any other man in the world than Farfrae, Henchard would probably have had pity on her. As it was, he could bring himself to show no mercy. Without another word, she called for the maid to fetch Elizabeth Jane from her room. When the girl saw Henchard, she went across to him. Elizabeth Jane, he said, taking her hand, I want you to hear this. And turning to Lucetta, will you or will you not marry me? If you wish it, Michael, I must agree. You say yes, I do. No sooner had she given this promise than she fell back in a fainting state. What dreadful thing drives her to say this, father, when it is such a pain to her? Asked Elizabeth Jane, kneeling down by Lucetta. Don't make her do anything against her will. I have lived with her and know that she cannot bear much. Don't be so silly, said Henchard drily. This promise will leave him free for you. If you want it. At this, Lucetta seemed to awake from her faint with a start. Him? Who are you talking about? She said wildly. Nobody, as far as I am concerned, said Elizabeth Jane. Oh, well, then it is my mistake, said Henchard. But the business is between me and Miss Templeman. She agrees to be my wife, and taking up his hat, he went away. Elizabeth Jane continued to kneel by Lucetta. What is this? She said. You called me Father Michael as if you knew him well. And how is it he has this power over you that you promise to marry him against your will? Ah, you have kept many secrets from me. Perhaps you have kept some from me. Lucetta murmured, with closed eyes, little thinking, however, that the secret of Elizabeth Jean's heart concerned the young man who had caused this damage to her own. I would not do anything against you at all, said Elizabeth Jane, hiding her emotion. I cannot understand how my father can command you like this. I do not like it at all. I'll go to him and ask him to release you. No, no, said Lucetta. Let it all be.
Hey there. Subscribe to my channel. And also press this bell icon.